Hello and welcome to That's Just Wild with me, Steve Baxshall.
Me, Lizzie Daly.
And me, Sarah Roberts.
The podcast all about nature, wildlife, and how I once got chased across a beach by a bloated, amorous elephant seal.
Amorous.
Amorous.
We all know what that means.
Chased you lovingly across the beach, or?
I mean, it's hard to tell. How can one look into the heart of an elephant seal? He had one of two things on the mind, and neither of them were going to be particularly fun. He was either going to savage me or, well, you know,
fun for
let's
the
not
seal.
go there.
Well, what's your most interesting encounter from this week then, and comparatively?
I've had a good one, actually. We picked up the kids after school a couple of days ago, and my good friend George Morris took us out in his rib, the whole family, and we went out to where the tuna were leaping and breaching on bait fish at the surface. I had forgotten to put my SD card in my camera, so rather than filming any of it, we just watched it, and these massive tuna that were pretty much as big as the rib were leaping out of the water right in front of us. It was like fireworks night, hearing the kids just going, "Ooh, ah!" What? It was utterly amazing. Sensational wildlife encounter right here in British seas. So yeah, that's been my biggie this week. What about you, Lizzie? Have you got one?
Yeah, I had a longhorn beetle crawl up my leg and right up to my butt crack, which was great as I tried to kind of pick it off with the whole crew there, camera ready. It was a wonderful moment. Bit of a highlight for me.
That's a hell of a contrast between the two of you there, isn't it?
That is an image right there, Lizzie. I mean, can I say, longhorn beetles don't go very fast. Why did you give it so much time to get all the way from your leg up to your butt crack?
Well, okay, so there's this longhorn beetle species is particularly big. So Sarah, if you imagine like massive mandibles, it's really quite an impressive beetle.
The longhorns are antenna. It's a huge, great big antenna, but they have most of them feed on wood and wood pulp, so the mandibles can, they could slice a pencil in half, no problem at all.
You let that go up your butt crack?
Because I was like, let's not do any sudden movements as it's travelling up my leg. And everyone's like, ha, 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 taking pictures, like, woo, embracing Sri Lanka.
So you
and
let
then,
it get to somewhere more sensitive?
No, Steve,
Lizzie,
I'm
come
honestly,
on.
I'm not exaggerating when I say it was sat in my butt crack. And I was like, if I move, it's going to be game over. I'm going to have two butt cracks. Anyway.
What position were you in? Like,
I mean,
just
we do
like
not
holding a
need to go
squat or
there.
something?
Seriously, I think we can move on right there before we get taken off the air.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, I feel like that would have gone the same way as what we're about to talk about today. Hey, Steve.
Stonking segue. Yes, because today we are talking about going viral.
Oof. All right. Well, where do we even start with this? Because I feel like we all are coming in from slightly different angles and experiences. But I think probably a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is social media. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because I'm sure all of us, and we'll go into this, have positive experiences and examples and case studies of the power of social media and how much impact you can have and how, you can make genuine change beyond just watching something and thinking it's amazing. You can now, act and call on governments with a click of a button. You can, reach people you would never imagine reaching through a particular show or even just a bit of work or a bit of science. So I think, it's a huge thing and I'm really glad we're talking about it. And yeah, I'm sure we're about to go down a bit of a wormhole with this topic.
Yeah, very much so. It's a subject that I've been really keen to talk about for a long time. Something that I am just learning about, really. I'm not from the generation where social media came into being.
I know.
No, but I mean, it's something that I feel I should be learning more about. I'm constantly trying to challenge myself to learn more. I have to say, Lizzie, without blowing any smoke, the way that you have done and run so much of your career through social media, I find really interesting. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. But I want to get into some of the positives, because I do see this being a real sea change in the way that conservation works, in the way that we perceive animals, in the way we record animal behavior. There are so many of these things that are changing out of all proportion to the time it's changing over. And a lot of those changes are good. So let's not get completely weighed down into the bad stuff.
Set the tone then. What's the good ones?
Okay, so I'll start with one really good one, which has happened just over the last couple of days. So I have been in contact with a good few conservationists in Australia who are doing all of their work online and particularly involved in the Nets Out Now campaigns, which is all working around shark nets off the coast of Australia. We've talked about this before. Shark nets are this thing which gives an image of protection for swimmers, but they only cover a small amount of the sea. Sharks can quite easily swim around them, swim under them. They do not provide any meaningful protection for the swimmers and bathers, but at the same time, they are culpable for a huge amount of marine entanglements. And in recent weeks, some of those marine entanglements have been filmed by a whole array of different content creators, influencers. They've hit social media in a big way.
Is this the mother and calf?
Exactly. Yeah. So I have been, drawn into this whole thing through Taylor Ladd Hudson, who's on Insta as Taylor X Ocean, through Jessica Lane, who was Miss Earth 2024, which itself is a whole social media phenomenon that she has used this the title that she was given and the platform it's given her to add weight to this massive campaign to show that shark nets don't work and they cause damage. And these clips have not surprisingly gone viral. Sarah, you've clearly seen them. Can you describe what you've seen in them?
It's pretty. I mean, to make a clip go viral, it has to evoke quite a bit of emotion in you generally. It's either going to be really sexy or really scary or really shocking. And I think this is really shocking, and it's also really sad. It's the clip of a female humpback, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and a calf, and it looks a little like the mum is trying to hold that calf up towards the surface, but it is absolutely mum and calf, but the calf more so completely and utterly entangled in a huge shark net that they've obviously hit and kept swimming. And does anything happen off the back of that? That's the problem that I find with social media is you see these videos and you have this horrible emotional burden that you're like, we need to do something. What can we do?
Yeah, so I've been in contact with all the guys over there who, first of all, got this footage to begin with, have released it. They are planning much, much bigger campaigns based around it. But the key thing really is that those simple images of an animal struggling, an animal frankly dying because of shark nets is the exact emotional trigger that you just mentioned there that is making people change their minds. That suddenly there are millions of people across Australia who are going, oh, okay, all right, now I get it. And that is imagery that it would be so difficult to disseminate in the conventional way. But on social media, bam, it's out there. People are seeing it. And it is changing opinion and could well lead to big changes in the way shark nets are deployed across Australia.
Do we know if the whale got disentangled at all?
So the guys have said that I think that the humpback was released, but sadly didn't make it afterwards. The calf, but didn't make it afterwards. We'll go on to, that footage was captured on a drone. Drones now, of course, are so widely available, and they don't have to be big broadcast quality drones to get stuff that can really smash it on social media. Lizzie, I know that you want to talk about that a little bit later on, about how it's actually changing our whole understanding of how animals move and where they go. And we're getting imagery now that using old-fashioned camera techniques you just would never get, because it takes serendipity. It takes the power of people. It takes lots and lots of people with the omnipresent ability to capture footage that we have now that we haven't had in the past, that I think has lots of potential for positive stuff.
I think that's a really wonderful example of that power in social media, in, making you want to engage with it, wanting to reach more people and grow an audience and actually use it. Because I don't know if you guys find this, but I'm constantly battling with how much time I spend on it, what kind of information I'm engaging with, and then that to and fro between creating a video that I know would do well versus posting something that I think would be of value, whether it's scientific information or, a message like that, Steve. For me, it's a bit of a constant battle. There's one page that I also love to throw in terms of, I guess, of a positive spin. Because Sarah, to your point, social media is a tricky one, but it strips away context. And I think for so many people who are on that platform, they don't realize the power that they've got or the responsibility that they should be aware of when they're posting things or chasing sensationalist clips and all the rest of it. One account that I have to say I've actually watched over the years and I'm quite impressed with, Sarah, I've got a feeling you'll hate it, but Nature is Metal.
There's a lot of animal behaviour on there. It's not necessarily the nicest animal behavior. It's the darker side of nature, but it is educational. It is real animal behavior. I personally would rather scroll through a load of surfboards or something than watch something being ripped apart. But from a behavioral and a ecology perspective, it's really interesting.
Interesting and important. And I think we need to recognize that the next generation is going to be getting by far the majority of their content about science, about natural history, about wildlife online. They're going to be getting it on
Yeah.
TikTok and everything that follows on from Instagram and Meta and all of the others. And so we have to embrace it. We have to figure out ways of countering the challenges of AI, for example. I see imagery every single day now that is clearly, to me, artificial intelligence that's been generated by a machine, and you look underneath and there are thousands of comments from people who absolutely think it's real, whether it's a giant anaconda that appears to be 60 meters long filmed from a helicopter, or whether it's somebody shaving barnacles off a whale. The quality of the imagery is phenomenal. And getting to find how we clearly define things as being real or not real is going to be one of the huge responsibilities that the three of us and our colleagues are most going to have to address in the future. It is going to be down to us to call out the nonsense, because not a lot of other people will. And, that is one of the huge challenges, but also the potential, the possibility, the millions of eyes that could well be seeing wildlife stuff that probably wouldn't watch an Attenborough documentary. And, all of us have had moments that have hit our social media platforms that have had far greater viewing figures than anything we've done on telly. I mean, Lizzie, your astounding lion's mane jellyfish thing that you had just a couple of years ago, it just seemed like everyone in the entire world saw that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of those early projects where myself and Sharkman Dan, friend of the podcast, Sarah knows Sharkman Dan very well from your shark show, we just went around the UK to showcase UK wildlife, and it did go viral. And it was a wonderful early career example of, I think, the power of social media in a good way. We set up a citizen science project to monitor jellyfish around UK beaches with the Marine Conservation Society off the back of it. It was trending above Trump. Political cartoonist Stephen Bell turned Trump into a giant jellyfish, which I'm just have as a poster in my room forever and always. But actually, it was a wonderful example for me, I think, early on in my career to go, okay, that's how you use social media, with the context of, I guess my intention was for it to reach people and reach audiences, but I wanted them to be educated. And kind of coming full circle to what we spoke about earlier, it's, the reason why you're posting things and how you want to grow your audience is so critical. And just kind of going back one step to that Nature is Metal page, the reason I mention it is because they have 7 million followers, and on every single post they include some ecological, behaviorally relevant information about that clip. They'll do their due diligence, they'll find out from the person who took that video as much information as they can, and they'll disseminate information that is valuable and educational alongside what is largely deemed a sensational video. And so for that, I think it's the best of a bad thing in the way that social media does want those viral clips.
But it is an absolute double-edged sword, isn't it? Because let's be honest, our career going viral is what you're chasing. It's the golden goose. You need as much of that as possible to get eyes on you, to be able to grow your audience, to be able to disseminate messages, like you said. But to go viral is quite hard in the world that we live in, because you are competing against those sexy videos. You are competing against misinformation, AI, all sorts of other things. And I think one of the interesting moments is where you get influencers that cross over between where they play the game and they make the footage that they know is going to go viral, but without necessarily having any other, I guess, point to that footage other than going viral. And I think one interesting story that's hit the news recently is a guy called The Real Tarzan.
Sarah, are you particularly active on social media? Do you spend much time on it? Is it something which you see as being a really big part of your job?
Massive part of my job. I'm not active enough on it. I think it comes with a horrible burden and pressure that you need to be posting all the time, following an algorithm, creating content that's going to go viral. Otherwise, you're just going to be overtaken by everyone else that's going viral. But yeah, no, it's a huge, huge part of my job. But it comes with the pro that I can tell stories online and get them out immediately or very, very quickly. Whereas if I'm pitching that same story, especially journalism, to television, you've got a 2-year turnaround generally at minimum for a lot of these stories. Whereas in the digital world, you can get the funding if you're savvy enough to get out and record the story, but then it becomes a battle because how do you make sure you do get the eyes on it afterwards?
Yeah. I mean, I have over the last few years experienced, I mean, I guess you could say the positive side of that with my Thames Water campaign, where I was testing the water on the Thames, came back with horrific results, and was able to basically get the results through the mail and then just like read them out on camera. And millions of people who were actually seeing what pollutants were in the Thames. And one of my viral moments to, pick that phrase was the interview that I did with someone from Thames Water and their response, which just, you wouldn't be able to show that in conventional media. There'd be plenty of lawyers who would stand in. And like you say, even if you were, it would be months before you'd be able to get it out there. But using new media, that stuff can get out there straight away. I am nothing like active enough on social media. I find it frankly baffling. There is stuff that I put up that I think this is going to absolutely smash it. And it gets like 300 hits. And then I went back through my stuff and I've got like just some stuff of me with a big anaconda. It's got 25 million views. And then other things that I think this is the greatest thing I've ever filmed, and nobody could be less interested. And just kind of learning those dynamics and the things that get people interested. I mean, it's a whole new wave of media. And we talked about, I had people talking to me about this who say that, on TikTok, if your message isn't got across in the first 3 seconds, then don't even bother posting it. It's got to be out there within 3 seconds or you're not achieving anything.
Yeah.
But also, I think I've been able to put up things like, for example, one of the things that I am most proud of is the video that I put out of me standing on the bottom as spotted dolphins kind of cruised around me. This beautiful, ethereal piece, which never even made it into the program that we were filming because, frankly, it's just a guy standing there with dolphins swimming around it. I'd put it up on Instagram with some nice music behind it, like 6 million hits. And so the language, I don't speak it yet, and I'm desperate to learn.
Steve, question for you is, do you ever go to social media now for new behaviors, sequences, ideas? Because I find that I'm constantly saving posts of, photographers in far-flung places or people are just super inspiring and going, the polar bears are, they show social behaviors, it's like all these new things that are popping up through social media.
Absolutely. So just yesterday, good friend of mine, Brett Lobwine, drew my attention to some drone footage of a blue whale cruising alongside Bustleton Jetty in Western Australia, which of itself, I mean, apart from anything else, it is the biggest looking blue whale you've ever seen. It genuinely looks like it is 30 meters long. Incredible. Also looks really skinny and scrawny and like it could do with a really good meal. And you can see the shore in the video. It just blew my mind. And then I've got this utterly, utterly remarkable video. One of the ones that I thought, oh, hang on a second, is that AI? That can't really be real, but it is. And it's from an amazing camera op and drone pilot called Daniel Cook. And Daniel has filmed footage of a surfing whale looking down on it from above. And this whale, it's a giant. I think it's probably a Bruder's whale. And you see these surfers lining up behind the break, getting ready to pull into this wave, and they pull in, and the whale cuts in front of them and surfs along underneath them in these crystal clear water. Like I say, first time I saw it, I was like, no way that is real. That is some high quality AI. But no, it's behavior captured by admittedly a very talented person, but not a pro, and someone who's getting it out, being seen by half the world on social media.
It's so powerful in that way, isn't it?
For ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com.
I guess the other side of the coin, and we should probably get into it, is the negatives, those that perhaps don't have the background that you do, Steve, the critical mind that you do, Sarah, to know how to portray the right information in the right way. And a large part of that I find on social media is the whole show and tell thing. And actually a difficult topic for, I think, us presenters, because two shots, close-ups, handling, that is a very sought after thing. And even, the greats like Sir David Attenborough would position himself quite closely to species or, behaviors or eggs, whatever it may be. So I'm just curious to know where to even begin.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. To get a viral video, there's 5 criteria on there. I think it's scary, shocking, sexy, humorous, and then I can't remember what the last one is, but the more of those things you get in one video, the more likely that it's going to go
I'm writing that
viral. So
down.
you often see literally a lot of influencers in the wildlife world losing their tops quite quickly, especially a few blokes that, are showcasing
Well,
a
that
bit of
was
skin to tick that
the
box
first
as well as
15
the
years of my
shocking.
career as well, Sarah, I have to say.
I mean, if it works, it works.
Quite often in this argument, I find that I have a visceral emotive reaction to influencers doing stuff where we work really, really hard for things that a lot of influencers just frankly set up. And I look at these things and it makes my blood boil because, they don't seem to have the respect for the animals that I've always wanted to have. They don't, as you say, include science or conservation. And then I sit back and I think, well, hang on, it's not that different from what I do. And then I look at them and they're kind of, they've got more followers than I have, probably a good deal younger than I am. They are speaking a language that I would love to be able to speak. And I kind of think, actually, there are far, far bigger problems out there than these influencers. And is it wrong for me to be judging them when essentially they're not that different to me?
Steve also blowing a bit of smoke, but you're very grounded and humble about what you do, but it's the context of why they're doing it. And I think it's so wonderful, some of the accounts that are doing these things based on that passion and perhaps not having the access to education or whatever it may be, which means that they're just going out and trying to spread the message in the best way that they can. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people have caught onto the idea that you can make to be frank, shitload of money through an app and through this platform, and it's very self-serving. I think we're losing sight very quickly on this online about why we're doing it.
Yeah, but that's it. That's what my problem is that
Mm.
if our only real problem is context,
Yeah.
then the bigger picture is that, actually wildlife have a lot bigger problems than just the context or the feeling behind a social media post.
The darker side came up recently, actually. In 2023, there was an investigation in some of the larger wildlife photography competitions. I'm sure you've all heard of this, but this competitive industry that's pushing people to get the best and the biggest photographs has created staging, hairspraying, mounting, using
Super glue, isn't it, as well?
using super glue on various different animals to get the perfect shot. Even species in captivity that they've recreated to look like they're in the wild to make the perfect photograph. And now you see on big photography competition websites, they'll have like a long list of ethical guidelines to consider, but there's so much that goes on that is really hard to tell now, whether there's, is AI generated, to your point, Steve, whether it is false, it's kind of being curated and set up to get the shot. And I think photography is a really big one because, the online community is massively into wildlife photography at the minute, and without the context of how they got the shot, I'm not sure whether I'd want to celebrate that photo, to be honest, if it's unknown whether it was done ethically or not.
I think this is also the double-edged sword as well, because what you do have is a lot of passionate people online that really, really care too. And for all these people that are cheating the system and doing things that are ethically, as you said, really, really questionable, there's also people out there who are looking to expose and who are using these digital footprints to be able to evidence things like that. And I think one example that's really interesting is in Florida, there's been a number of influencers who have viral clips of them, for example, pulling out large python snakes from in the sewage system to sort of shock people and push this narrative of these invasive snakes getting in lots of different places, and disposing of them. And those same people have come under fire because these internet heroes, I will call them, have gone through their posts and seen that exact same snake you just pulled out of the Everglades 2 days ago and posed with it. And we know because when we look in the photo, we can digitally ID and we can see the prints and we can copy the prints across. And I think in some respects, for evidence case, there is there's some positives there, or hope, shall we say, there for these situations.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to stick on the hope for a little bit, if you don't mind, because we have taken a lot of care over the last couple of seasons of Deadly 60 to feature young, for want of a better word, influencers who are working with wildlife in new, different, and I think, frankly, very inspiring ways. I mentioned Michael with his peacock jumping spiders in Perth
Yeah.
in a previous episode. Madison Stewart, who is an absolute hero of mine, who is working in Lombok in Indonesia to bring former shark fishermen into the shark tourism trade. And she's driven this incredible program of education and awareness to create what I think is, pretty much the perfect conservation project, all driven by social media. And I worked also with someone called Miller Wilson, who is kind of like the next Steve Irwin and has entirely built his career around YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. And I was lucky enough to spend a few days with Wilson, this frankly astounding young man who in his late teens did entirely self-filmed wildlife documentaries. And, I was nervous as to what his ethics would be when I spent time with him. But, all I met was someone with a big brain and lots of experience that took me out and found me more stonefish in about half an hour right in front of the local harbour than I think I've ever seen in the rest of my life put together. There are lots and lots of young people who are absolutely setting wildlife filmmaking apart, and they're doing it all in portrait style on a phone. and I find that intimidating, but it's also super, super exciting because, to your point earlier on, Sarah, you can do it without filters. You don't have to have all of your content gone through by commissioners and channels. You don't have to think endlessly about what people might want. You just think about what you personally, as an intelligent person, think is good, think is cool. And I think that there is a purity about that we have to embrace, because this is where it's going.
And in the same way that, we've alluded to social media being like the Wild West, it can be something that we can celebrate. Those young people who are inspiring, Steve, that you mentioned, look at those accounts as like a good example. Find people who are doing things ethically and in a really good way. There's nothing more wonderful than seeing a piece of footage, behavior, whatever it may be, a young person telling a story and they're doing it, in the best way possible without putting the ethics and the welfare of wildlife second. I think a big part of that, in my world at least, that I've seen on the social media is through drones. And it's the most wonderful way of seeing behavior, as you've already highlighted, Steve, but it can also be a bit of a double-edged sword, just in that some of the drone behavior that is celebrated is running animals that are moving away. So I just have put together like a little list of things if you are somebody who flies a drone recreationally, professionally, just some positive things that you can be mindful of if you are flying drones. So the obvious alarm calls in species of primates, vigilance, any animal that's looking at a drone typically is not great anyway. It's not good footage, and in broadcast would be considered disturbance, so you're trying to avoid anything where they're looking at you, you're too close. Obviously mobbing behaviour you see in a lot of terns or oyster catchers, hawks, anything like that. Flying away, running away, grouping behaviour in lots of prey species. You'll see, like muskox, a great example. If they feel threatened, they'll kind of move their bodies to face you. Stampede behaviours, avoid. I think the great thing about this is you can use these tools and you can use social media to really better your knowledge as a naturalist, or use your knowledge as a naturalist to then kind of share that with a wider audience and educate others. So I think, I sound like a bit like a broken record, but I think that context is something that I do want to celebrate, just because if you are somebody who's passionate, if you are somebody who, wants to be a better scientist or naturalist, or just somebody who, wants to share their passions about moss or slugs, social media can be a great tool for that. But really try and put as much work into the context and the journey to get there as you do in posting. That would, I guess, be my tidbit on that.
To pick up on what you just said on drones, I love that.
Mm.
And your advice there is invaluable both for drone pilots who are flying drones and, capturing stuff, that they should be looking out for all those particular things. But also, if you are looking at stuff on social media and you see those things clearly in a drone shot, if you're watching a herd of buffalo and they are stampeding, and they're stampeding because of the drone, then let the content creator know that it's not cool. Put it in the
Totally.
comments. I think be looking out for those things, and I think that we do need to be very aware as consumers of digital content. We have to always be looking to the things that we're seeing with a critical eye, because there are things that happen in social media which can, for example, drive the illegal wildlife trade, that can drive a passion for a particular species that can be detrimental to that animal.
Yeah. It's a funny one with impact, because I don't know if you guys have found this. I mean, my career has been built on having kind of a scientist hat and then working in the broadcast world. And then obviously social media is part of that, part of our jobs. But I find that the most impact comes with that collaboration and across industries, that intersection, which allows you to write a journal, but then shout about it through a program. But I think you're absolutely right, Steve. I think if we completely ignore it or shun it, we're not going to get anywhere. And engagement with all sides, with that critical mind and the ability to talk it through and discuss it, and build a platform that allows that discussion, I think is key. So otherwise we'll all just end up arguing with each other until all the animals are literally extinct, to be
Yeah.
honest.
The flip side of this would be that there are some ways that social media is driving real harm and is driving potential extinction of some species. So for the last few years, I've been desperately trying to get a documentary off the ground. I call it Clickstiction, and it's all about how social media is driving the illegal wildlife trade. To any commissioners who are out there who are looking for a very, very hard-hitting documentary, please commission me. But as yet, no one's gone for it. But what I'd found in developing this idea is that as much as $1.5 billion worth of illegal wildlife trade passes directly through social media. In the preparation for this, I actually went onto one of the big channels, not going to say what it is to begin with, and just literally typed in "buy pangolin," and you could buy pangolin scales directly through that network. You can
Oof.
buy obscure morphs of particular kind of animals. You could buy things like slow loris and slender loris, which for a time, huge persecution of this species was being driven by the fact that we found them kind of cute and adorable, and they could be directly traded through social media. Things like cheetahs. Cheetahs were being taken from the wild as cubs to be kept as pets by very high worth individuals, and all of that process happened online. So there are ways that real negativity for animals and for conservation is happening online. Let's keep some perspective. Let's keep some perspective about the stuff that does real harm, and the stuff that, could be tinkered with, could be made a little bit better, but essentially is still a part of our realm.
Well put.
Yeah, so just to build on that, Steve, there was an article that was published in Manga Bay as well, just recently, where they probed a maze of websites to be able to tally the amount of shark meat that was being sold by government. So, and that was in Brazil. So there are people out there that are using these huge social media platforms, as you say, that aren't always used for good, but also using those as evidence and being able to hopefully get some positive change off the back of it.
We could talk about this for hours, I'm sure. I want to share with you.
I know there's so much more.
I know. I want to share with you a little positive to end on, because I'm sure we've all been involved with some level of citizen science project. But there are so many out there, and they cover such a variety of things. And I think that is one of the shining beacons of having so many people engaging in wildlife and conservation through social media, is the ability to lean into the public's, pictures or recordings or sightings to build up a better understanding of wildlife. Projects like taking pictures of gulls eating anything, including your Cornish pasties and your ice creams, helping scientists understand dietary habits and conservation of gulls in the UK. There's plenty of other projects you can do, like shark surveys, watching BRUV, so kind of remote underwater cameras, and go through footage and doing IDing. There's the Big Butterfly Count, the Great British Bird Watch. I'm going to ask you guys what your favourite is, but there's one project that, for all the weirdos listening to this, myself included, there's this really cool project called Project Splatter, which is essentially creating a UK-wide roadmap of roadkill, which I know sounds a bit weird, but it really helps quantify and map species that are coming into contact with cars and roads. And the whole idea is to build a better understanding of movements of animals and how we can facilitate better connection between land use across the UK. You guys must have some favourites.
I love the butterfly count this year because through the whole of the spring and summer, I was saying to anybody who would listen, feels like this year's been a really good one for butterflies. Doesn't it feel like it's been a really good year for butterflies this year? And then the butterfly count was done, and guess what? It was a really good year for butterflies. Back of the net.
Amazing.
Sarah?
I'm a big fan of going and finding the shark eggs on the beaches and looking
Nice.
at those and adding those to the surveys. But yeah, the egg
Nice.
case hunt.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Well, that's it for today. Remember, you'll have a Q&A episode coming your way on Friday. So remember to send your questions to questions@that'sjustwild.com and we'll get to them.
That's Just Wild is an original Fresh Air production. The producers are Eva Hickenbotham and Emma Crampton. Your support is really welcome, so you can follow us on your favourite podcast app, leave us a review. It makes all the difference to the whole team. And for ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com.
Remember, we're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and you can find us at That's Just Wild Pod. Thanks for listening and see you next week.